Welcome to the deep dive. We're just so glad you're here in the room with us today. Because today, well, we are unpacking a stack of material that is...
It's just massive.
It really is massive. And quite frankly, it is one of the most diverse, contradictory, and just utterly fascinating collections of documentation we have ever laid on this table.
Oh, without a doubt.
I mean, we are looking at a literal PhD dissertation in applied ecopsychology.
Yeah.
We're sifting through deeply personal, emotionally raw, unpublished memoirs.
Right.
We have highly technical, heavily annotated summaries of international legal disputes based in Eastern Europe.
And this is the wildest part.
Yes. Bridging all of this together, we have hundreds of pages of transcripts detailing these incredibly poetic, philosophical chat logs with an artificial intelligence.
It is a genuinely remarkable cross-section of human documentation. I mean, when you first look at the stack, it seems almost impossibly disparate.
Yeah.
Like, what does a dissertation on nature psychology have to do with a foreign property dispute or, an AI chat log? But as you dig in, you realize all of it centers around one singular, intensely compelling individual.
Exactly. We're looking at the life, the mind, the complete deconstruction, and the painstaking reinvention of a man named Kevin Jarvis. And to give you listening right now a quick snapshot of who we're dealing with here, just imagine a guy who spent the first half of his life as a high-speed international freight pilot.
And not just small planes.
No, we're talking about navigating massive Boeing 747s across the globe, living life at Mach 0.82 in the stratosphere, and then the crash happens.
Yeah.
He completely radically reinvents himself. Today, according to these files, he is a permaculturist, a master homesteader, and a self-described Earth avatar living entirely off the grid in a 1907 Saxon house.
In a tiny, remote village called Somerton, deep in the Carpathian Mountains of Transylvania, Romania.
It's just wild.
It is the ultimate paradigm shift. You're looking at a human being who intentionally migrated from the bleeding edge of hyper-industrialized, fossil fuel-driven global logistics.
The very pinnacle of modern speed and extraction.
Exactly, to planting garlic by hand in the dirt of Transylvania.
And our mission for you today, as we sift through this massive stack of sources, is to use Kevin's life as a comprehensive guide for healing the human spirit. Because his story, it isn't just a quirky biography. We are going to trace his history, his profound failures, his incredible successes, and his incredibly painful ongoing struggles.
All to understand what it actually means to escape modern burnout.
Yes. We're going to explore how you can cure your own modern exhaustion, how you can reintegrate your spirit into the natural world, and how you can actually learn to live the Earth way.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Kevin's life serves as a perfect microcosm of humanity's broader transition. We are all, collectively, whether we realize it or not, wrestling with this immense shift right now.
We really are.
We're trying to navigate away from this era of hyper-industrialized speed, relentless resource extraction, and just overwhelming digital overload. And we're moving toward a desperate biological need for nature-connected resilience, slowness, and genuine sustainability. What makes these memoirs so compelling is that Kevin didn't just theorize about this transition from the safety of an armchair. He lived it at its most extreme. He crashed headfirst into the wall of it, and then he meticulously built a completely new philosophy out of the rubble.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start where Kevin started, which means we have to talk about speed. Because before you can even begin to understand the profound peace of a Transylvanian village, you have to understand the sheer, unrelenting, terrifying velocity of his early life.
Right.
According to his memoirs, this is a guy who was flying airplanes at age 15. He was legally flying a highly complex piece of machinery through the sky before he was old enough to hold a driver's license for a car.
That detail alone speaks volumes about the psychological and neurological trajectory he was placed on so early in life. I mean, the neural pathways he was forming as an adolescent were almost entirely based on control, machinery, rigid checklists, instrumentation, and altitude.
Wow, yeah.
He was literally and figuratively disconnected from the ground from his formative years onward.
And by the time he was 27, his aviation career had absolutely skyrocketed. He was flying as a flight engineer for the legendary Flying Tiger line, which, if you know your aviation history, was eventually acquired by FedEx.
Right.
He was flying DC-8s and then moved up to the massive Boeing 747 freighters crisscrossing the globe. The memoirs paint this incredibly visceral picture of the late 20th century cargo world. This was the birth of the just-in-time, or JIT, logistics lifestyle.
The roar of speed.
The roar of speed. It was this era where global commerce suddenly demanded that everything be everywhere. instantly. It was an entire culture built around shaving hours and then shaving minutes off delivery times just to keep the fragile global supply chain humming.
And we really need to pause and quantify what that lifestyle actually looks like in terms of environmental and energetic cost, because it sets the stage for his entire philosophical pivot later on. His personal records detail the staggering, almost incomprehensible metrics of this high-speed existence.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
A fully loaded 747 freighter cruising at Mach 0.82 at 35,000 feet burns roughly 10,000 pounds of jet of fuel every single hour.
10,000 pounds. An hour. It is hard to even conceptualize that volume of energy consumption.
Precisely. In his notes, he calculates that for a typical trans-Pacific hop, say, from Los Angeles to Tokyo, they were converting something in the neighborhood of 150 barrels of refined crude oil into pure forward thrust and atmospheric exhaust for one flight.
He describes these planes in his writing as thirsty beasts. And the cargo they were hauling across the Pacific wasn't just mail. They were flying racehorses, massive pallets of pineapples, highly sensitive circuit boards, auto parts.
Just everything.
Everything, all orchestrated in this frantic, never-ending dance across the globe. But reading through these logs, what really struck me wasn't the mechanics of the planes. It was how Kevin describes the human toll of this lifestyle.
Yeah.
He uses this phrase, burnout, in the briefing room. You were moving so fast, defying time zones and geography so constantly, that your biology literally starts to unravel at the seams.
What's fascinating here is the precise psychological and physiological breakdown he documents. It goes far beyond simply being tired. He describes these moments of profound dissociation, waking up at 3 in the morning in the ice-rimed dark of Anchorage, Alaska, or sitting and staring blankly out the window of a Tokyo bullet train, and his internal compass is completely shattered. He actually writes about asking himself, am I in Tokyo? Am I in Guam? Am I home? He refers to it as a jet lag of the soul.
Jet lag of the soul. That is such a haunting way to phrase it.
It is the ultimate manifestation of human disconnection from natural rhythms. Our biology, our endocrine systems, our circadian rhythms, they all evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to sync perfectly with the rising and setting of the sun, the turning of the seasons, the gravitational pull of the earth. And in the span of a single generation, we built an industrialized society that completely ignores all of that. We strapped ourselves into pressurized aluminum tubes and decided we could outrun the sun.
Which brings us to a massive foundational concept in our stack of sources today. Because Kevin didn't just feel this burnout and complain about it. He eventually went and got a PhD in applied eco-psychology to deeply academically understand it.
Yes, under Dr. Mike Cohen.
Exactly. He studied under a pioneer in the field named Dr. Mike Cohen. And through this rigorous academic work, Kevin articulated and expanded upon a condition that he calls earth misery.
Yes, Earth misery, or EM, is the absolute bedrock concept for this entire deep dive. In his dissertation, Kevin defines Earth misery as the profound emotional, physical, and social anguish caused by modern industrial society systematically severing our inherent ties with the natural world.
Oh.
It is vital to understand that this is not just feeling a little melancholic because you haven't taken a walk in a park lately.
Right, it's not a superficial sadness.
No, it is a deep, traumatic alienation. His research argues that this specific alienation is a root cause contributing to violence, autoimmune disease, addiction, and the pervasive, gnawing sense of emptiness so many people feel in the modern world. It is the trauma of an organism that has been removed from its natural habitat.
So what does this all mean for us? For you, the listener, sitting in traffic right now or sitting in a cubicle, how do we actually catch this earth misery? Kevin's dissertation points the finger directly at something he calls wrangled stories.
Wrangled stories are the insidious, false, societal narratives that we are fed from the moment we are born. It is the foundational story that humanity is somehow separate from and must conquer nature rather than existing as a symbiotic part of it. It's the story that success is defined by speed, material accumulation, and complete insulation from the elements.
It's the idea that a good life means you never have to feel the cold, you never have to feel the heat, and you can get a pineapple delivered to your door in December.
Exactly. Urbanization, purely extractive technology, modern industrial agricultural practices, they all reinforce these wrangled stories. We are indoctrinated to view the earth strictly as a resource repository to be managed and extracted, rather than a vast, living, breathing system that we are intrinsically woven into.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I want you, the listener, to stick with me here, because this is going to challenge everything you were taught in kindergarten biology. Dr. Mike Cohen's theory of eco-psychology, which Kevin heavily embraces and expands upon in his doctoral work, argues that the very idea of humans having only 5 senses is, in itself, a wrangled story.
It is a radical reframing of human biology and perception. Modern Western society rigidly claims we have exactly 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell.
Right.
But applied ecopsychology, backed by biological observation, argues that we actually possess 54 scientifically verifiable, distinct natural senses.
54. And the dissertation actually lists them out. We're talking about the Greenway 54 senses. You have your sense of temperature, your sense of gravity, the sense of thirst, the sense of motion. But as you read down the list, it goes so much deeper than just physiological inputs.
It bridges the physical and the emotional. For example, sense number 25 is the sense of distress or pain. It is recognized as a vital communicative biological function, not just a negative experience to be numbed.
Okay.
And sense number 54, which is framed as the culmination of all the others, is the sense of love, belonging, unity, and homeostatic balance with nature.
I really want to focus on that for a second.
Yeah.
The idea that love and unity aren't just abstract emotional concepts, but are actually classified as a biological sense, just like sight or smell, that changes everything about how you interact with the world.
And this framework is the absolute crux of understanding Earth misery. Think about the modern lifestyle. When we live our entire lives indoors, staring at glowing rectangular screens,
Right.
sitting in climate-controlled offices, or strapped into those aluminum tubes flying at Mach 0.82, we are effectively starving 49 of our natural senses.
We overstimulate sight and sound to the point of absolute exhaustion with artificial inputs. Notifications, emails, fluorescent lights, jet engines, all while the rest of our biological sensory apparatus completely atrophies from disuse. Earth misery is quite literally the pain of those dozens of neglected senses quietly screaming out for connection.
And Kevin lived that starvation at its absolute peak.
He did. But the universe has a funny way of intervening. You can only outrun your own biology for so long before the physical world forces you to a dead stop. And for Kevin, that stop wasn't a gentle realization. It was violence.
It was the definitive catalyst for his entire transformation. The records show that in 1999, Kevin was medically retired from aviation at the age of 39. And the specific incident that ended his career is deeply symbolic. The memoirs detail a severe crash in Taipei where he, in his own medical description, shredded his sacrum.
When I read that, it felt almost too on the nose to be real life. Your sacrum is your literal center of gravity. For a man whose entire identity, whose entire neurological framework since he was 15 years old was built on defying gravity, on chasing altitude, on mastering high-speed machinery.
To have that shattered.
Exactly. To have his literal anatomical center of gravity shattered, forcing a complete and total halt to his high-altitude life. It is an aggressively poetic tragedy.
It forced a total system reboot. Think about the identity crisis that triggers. When the speed is gone, when the captain's uniform is gone, when the immense external validation and authority of the international aviation world is abruptly stripped away, who are you?
Yeah.
He was left with nothing to distract him. He had to face his own profound Earth misery head-on. And that physical grounding began an incredible geographic and spiritual odyssey to find an antidote.
We track this journey through his memoirs, and it reads less like a travelogue and more like a map of a soul desperately searching for bedrock. He leaves the world of aviation behind. He goes from California, moves up to Washington State, over to Colorado.
He was moving constantly.
Constantly. He throws himself into the physical world. He becomes an avid skier and a serious mountaineer. He actually summits Denali in Alaska at age 29, which, let's be honest, requires an immense amount of physical endurance and a completely different kind of focus than sitting in a cockpit.
But notice the pattern there. Even in his early attempts at grounding himself, he is still chasing extremes. Summiting Denali is an incredible feat, but it is still a conquest. It is still pushing the human body to its absolute limits against a harsh environment.
That's a great point.
He was transitioning his energy, but he hadn't quite found the stillness yet. The real pivot, the philosophical bedrock, happens when he relocates to Custer, South Dakota, around 2001.
South Dakota. This is where the academic theories of ecopsychology finally met ancient lived wisdom. It's where he meets a man named Burt Rooks.
Burt Rooks was a respected Lakota elder, and he became Kevin's direct mentor for 4 highly formative years. And there's this one specific, incredibly memorable anecdote in the memoirs that I think perfectly captures exactly where Kevin was in his spiritual development during this era.
Right, the Inipi ceremony. For those listening who might know the physical endurance required for a traditional Lakota Inipi, or sweat lodge, You know it is intense. You have to picture the oppressive heat, the steam rising off the stones, the pitch-black darkness, the intense physical and spiritual endurance it requires just to remain inside.
It's overwhelming.
The memoirs describe Kevin participating in the ceremony. And as the heat reaches its absolute peak, everyone else inside the lodge is just laid out, lying flat on the dirt ground, practically dying from the temperature, just trying to survive the heat.
But Bert Rooks looks over through the steam, and there is Kevin. He isn't lying down. He is sitting completely upright, legs crossed, perfectly calm, his breathing steady and measured.
And Bert observes this unnatural calm, and he says something profound to the group, and specifically to Kevin. He says, "The holy men of Pine Ridge would love to have what you have. You have found a way to communicate with the Creator, creation, and I don't know how you did it." And then Bert gives Kevin his ultimate mission. He tells him, "My job with you is to help you build a solid foundation under the castle you are building. I am here to help you build your castle on bedrock."
Build your castle on bedrock. When you juxtapose that mandate against the fact that his physical bedrock, his sacrum, was literally shattered in a plane crash, the resonance is incredible.
It gives me chills every time I read it.
It is the ultimate grounding. And what Bert so astutely recognized was that Kevin had already done a tremendous amount of internal spiritual work on his own. He had the raw materials for the castle. He just desperately needed the framework, the traditional wisdom, to synthesize it all so it wouldn't collapse under its own weight.
And synthesize he did. The sources show that Kevin didn't just adopt Lakota spirituality and call it a day, dropping everything else. He became this absolute master of blending seemingly disparate philosophies into a cohesive worldview. He took the middle way of Zen Buddhism, which teaches that our fundamental ignorance of our true nature is the root of all human suffering.
He then braided that together with Vedanta Hinduism, specifically the concept that we are all inherently part of a supreme unified existence, but we have simply forgotten our connection to it due to the illusions of the material world.
Right.
And he layered both of those Eastern philosophies seamlessly into the Lakota doctrine of the 7 generations.
That is such a powerful doctrine. The ethic that every single decision you make today must be rigorously evaluated by its potential impact on the next 7 generations of life, not just your children, but 7 generations out.
He even heavily cites the teachings of the mid-century British philosopher Alan Watts, who was famous for popularizing Eastern philosophy in the West, and he places Watts right alongside the incredibly laid-back, Zen-like life approach of the American musician Jimmy Buffett.
I know. When you first read that list, Zen Buddhism, Lakota elders, Alan Watts, and Jimmy Buffett, it sounds chaotic. It sounds like a spiritual buffet. But when you read his actual writings, it isn't chaotic at all.
Not at all.
He extracts the core from each of them because they're all ultimately pointing toward the exact same universal truth. Reconnection, non-attachment, living in the present flow rather than fighting against it.
And this massive decades-long synthesis leads Kevin to identify his role in the world. He calls himself an Earth Avatar.
Now wait, let's clarify that term because Earth Avatar sounds like a superhero from a sci-fi movie.
It does, but his definition is deeply grounded. An Earth Avatar is not some mystical, unattainable deity floating above the rest of us. In the memoirs, he recalls a conversation with an Athabascan woman in Alaska who gave him a much more grounded title. She called him a practical shaman.
A practical shaman. I love that.
A practical shaman is someone who first does the brutal work of healing themselves through nature, through the conscious activation of those 54 dormant senses. They cure their own earth misery. But, and this is the absolute vital, non-negotiable part of the philosophy, they do not just stay isolated in the woods forever once they find peace.
Yeah, the sources actually quote the famous wilderness survival expert Tom Brown Jr. on this exact point. Brown teaches that if you go out into the deep wilderness, find your enlightenment, find your peace, and then you just build a cabin and stay there alone for the rest of your life, you're actually being incredibly selfish.
Exactly. The true role of the Earth Avatar, the practical shaman, is to take that hard-won healing, take that deep synthesized nature connection, and return to the community. You have to return to the village.
Yes.
You return to help others who are still suffering from their earth misery. You become a living, breathing ambassador for the Earth's natural systems, translating that wisdom for the people who are still stuck in the briefing room burning out.
Okay, so this all sounds beautiful in theory, but what does this actually look like in practice? For you, listening to us right now, how do you actively live what he calls the Earth Way? Well, for Kevin, living the Earth way meant eventually moving away from Sweden, where he spent 19 years of his life after South Dakota, and relocating to that 1907 Saxon house in Transylvania. So, Martin, yes, it means his daily life is consumed by brewing his own artisanal beer, distilling natural cordials, rendering and making his own soap, doing traditional hand-cut timber framing, and practicing intensive permaculture gardening.
Permaculture is essentially the physical agricultural manifestation of his entire internal philosophy. It's not just a way to grow tomatoes, it is a comprehensive design system for sustainable, integrated living. And Kevin's life in Romania leans heavily, almost religiously, on the three core ethics of permaculture.
Let's break those down because they are brilliant in their simplicity.
First, earth care. This is the mandate to actively care for all living and non-living systems of the planet, the soil, the water, the wildlife. Second, people care. This is the deep understanding that you cannot separate human well-being from ecological well-being. If you genuinely care for the earth, you inherently care for the people who rely on it for survival.
And third, which I think is the most challenging one for modern society, fair share, which means determining what your actual needs are, taking only that, and then actively redistributing the surplus back into the system. And that doesn't just mean surplus food. It means redistributing surplus knowledge, surplus energy, and surplus wealth to ensure the whole system thrives. But listen, you do not have to pack up your life, sell your car, and move to rural Romania to do this. The brilliance of Kevin's work is that he took his PhD, his deep mentorship with Burt Rooks, his time on Denali, and his decades of homesteading, and he distilled all of that massive experience into highly actionable tools.
Yes, the practices.
Exactly. So let's unpack these practices because these are physical actions you can literally start doing the minute this deep dive is over to begin curing your own earth misery.
What's fascinating here is how beautifully simple yet biologically profound these practices are. They are designed to bypass the intellectual brain and directly hack the nervous system. Let's look at the first one Kevin heavily recommends, wide-angle vision, or WAV.
Wide-angle vision is the direct biological antidote to tunnel vision. Think about your average day. Think about what your eyes are doing right now. You are staring at a phone screen. Then you shift to a computer monitor. Then you stare at the bumper of the car directly in front of you in traffic.
It's all narrow focus.
Right. Your eyes, and by extension your brain, are locked in this constant, stressful, narrow focus. In the natural world, narrow focus means you are either hunting prey or you are the prey being hunted. It spikes your cortisol. WAV completely short-circuits that stress response. Here is how you do it, exactly as Kevin describes it in his guides. You stand up and you stretch your arms out wide to your sides, parallel to the ground. Then you wiggle your fingers.
Now, without moving your head side to side, and while keeping your gaze soft and directed at the ground maybe 10 feet ahead of you, you stretch your awareness and try to catch the movement of your wiggling fingers in the very edges of your peripheral vision.
You are intentionally, consciously engaging your peripheral sight. Kevin calls it an owl-eyed, inclusive gaze. It is about seeing the entirety of the environment all at once without fixating on any one specific threat or object. The sources mention that many indigenous tribes consider this specific, soft way of seeing to be the gateway to the spirit world.
Which makes sense neurologically.
It does. From a neurological standpoint, it literally forces your nervous system out of sympathetic fight or flight mode and into a parasympathetic state of holistic awareness.
Yeah.
The best part, you can practice this while walking down a busy city street.
Right.
It completely changes how you physically move through space.
It is a brilliant neurological hack to instantly reconnect you to your immediate environment. And it pairs perfectly with his second major practice, which he adapted from the teachings of Tom Brown Jr., the breath-to-heart meditation.
Now, if you are someone who hates traditional meditation, listen up. Because this isn't your standard. Sit quietly on a cushion and try to clear your mind meditation. Kevin freely admits that for a lot of people, sitting quietly just feels like watching a parade of highly stressful, anxious thoughts march by. This practice is completely different. It is highly active.
It is entirely embodied. You begin by lying flat on your back, and you systematically, intentionally tense every single muscle in your body. You scrunch your face up as tight as you can. You clench your fists until your knuckles are white. You curl your toes. You tighten your core. You hold that immense artificial tension for a few seconds, and then you release it all at once, exhaling sharply and going completely limp like a rag doll.
You repeat that full body tension and release twice. Then you move into visualization. You imagine a purifying, incredibly bright white light entering your body through the soles of your feet. You actively visualize pulling up through your calves, over your knees, up through your torso, feeling it cleanse all your internal organs. You pull it right up through your neck and into the crown of your head until you feel like your entire body is physically glowing with this light.
And then comes the anchor, what Kevin calls the triple breath trigger. Once you're in that deeply relaxed, glowing, visualized state, you take a massive deep breath in through your nose until you literally feel your ears throb with the pressure. You hold that breath. Then you exhale forcefully through your mouth until your lungs are completely painfully empty. And you hold that emptiness for a beat. You repeat that specific extreme breathing pattern twice more.
The absolute brilliance of the triple breath is that once you've done the full lying down meditation enough times, you effectively program your nervous system. You don't have to lie down anymore. Kevin says he uses just the triple breath trigger while standing in a frustrating line at the Romanian post office or mid-argument with a teenager.
That's amazing.
You just hit the trigger. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And it drops your brain instantly back into that grounded bedrock state of peace. It's portable serenity.
Which perfectly leads us to the third and perhaps most poetic core practice of the Earth Way, the sit spot.
The sit spot is your personal daily portal to the web of life. And again, it's incredibly simple. You choose a sanctuary outdoors. It absolutely does not have to be deep in the untouched wilderness. It could be a quiet corner of your urban backyard or a specific bench in a local city park under a tree. For Kevin, it's a very specific mossy stump, located exactly 30 paces behind his chicken coop in Transylvania.
But there are strict, non-negotiable rules for the sit spot to work. You must go to the exact same spot every time. You go rain or shine, snow or heat. You absolutely do not bring your phone. You do not bring a journal to write in. You do not bring a book to read. Your singular job is to go to that spot, sit down, and remain there for at least 20 minutes.
And the goal, as Kevin so beautifully puts it in his writing, is to stay perfectly still until the land forgets you're a visitor. He says that at first it feels terribly awkward. When you walk into the woods, you're a disruption. The birds stop singing, the squirrels run up the trees and give you the side eye because you are a loud, massive anomaly in their environment.
Right.
But if you sit still and you keep showing up to the same spot every single day, the baseline of nature slowly returns. The environment eventually accepts your presence as normal.
The memoirs share this breathtaking anecdote to illustrate exactly what happens when you fully commit to the sit spot over time. Kevin writes about sitting on his stump on a quiet spring day, practicing his wide-angle vision, and a wild fox kid, a baby fox, wandered out of the brush, walked right up to him, and literally fell asleep leaning against his leather boot.
That is the ultimate validation of the practice. That is Sense 54 in action, the biological sense of absolute unity and belonging. In that moment, you are no longer a human conquering nature. You are just part of the furniture of the forest.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of Kevin's life, we have to acknowledge a hard truth. Achieving this state of Zen, mastering the sit spot, becoming an Earth avatar, it does not render you immune to the incredibly painful, messy realities of human existence. In fact, opening up your senses often makes you more acutely aware of the pain.
Which brings us to a critical juncture in our deep dive today. And before we go any further, I want to pause and speak directly to you, the listener, for a moment. We are about to transition into discussing some highly sensitive, heavily documented, and ongoing legal and personal disputes involving Kevin in Romania. Our mission here today is to explore how his philosophy of the Earth Way holds up under extreme, real-world friction. We are acting strictly as impartial guides through these specific legal summaries and personal notes. We are absolutely not taking sides, we are not casting judgment on anyone involved, and we are not endorsing any specific viewpoints regarding these legal or personal matters. We are simply reporting the contents of the provided source material to understand the profound human experience at the center of it.
It is vital to view this next phase of his life through the lens of applied eco-psychology that we just discussed. Because the true test of a philosophy isn't how it functions when you are watching a fox sleep on your boot. The question is, how does a philosophy of peace, non-attachment, and nature connection withstand profound interpersonal trauma and legal warfare?
Exactly. And the sources outline an incredibly complex, devastatingly painful situation. Kevin's relationship with his partner, Adina, who is a Romanian citizen and the mother of their young daughter, Frida, deeply deteriorated over time.
According to the extensive legal summaries and Kevin's personal notes in the stack, he made immense financial, physical, and emotional investments to build their shared Earthway dream in Samartan. He states that to fund this dream, he sold 2 properties he solely owned in Sweden, liquidating his life's assets, and poured the proceeds, along with his ongoing retirement income, totaling well over 400,000 euros, into purchasing and extensively renovating 2 historical 1907 houses in Transylvania.
And reading the notes, we are talking about massive, back-breaking renovations. He wasn't just writing checks. He was putting on new roofs, doing complex timber framing, turning raw attics into livable spaces, building out a custom brewery room, laying radiant heating. He was, quite literally, with his own hands, building that castle on bedrock that Burt Rooks told him to build.
Yes.
But here is the critical legal friction at the center of the dispute. Because Kevin was actively navigating his complex residency status as a foreigner in Romania at the time of purchase, those homes were titled solely in Adina's name.
Kevin claims in the legal filings that there were clear, repeated verbal promises made between them that once he obtained his permanent Romanian residency, which he eventually did, his name would legally be added as a co-owner to the deeds. This was meant to formally recognize his massive financial input and to secure the family's joint future, specifically for their daughter Frida.
But the sources indicate that those promises were never kept. The relationship broke down amidst intense, deeply upsetting allegations from both sides, including claims of verbal and physical abuse. Kevin reports being excluded from the main bedroom, facing profound hostility in the home he rebuilt, and ultimately being confronted with the stark reality that Adina explicitly refused to add his name to the property titles.
Furthermore, the legal documents outline ongoing, highly contentious claims involving penal fraud, domestic violence ordinances, and disputes over stolen, high-value camera gear and drained savings accounts. Kevin suddenly found himself navigating the incredibly dense complexities of the Romanian Civil Code, specifically Articles 1345 through 1348, which deal with the legal concept of unjust enrichment.
Let's briefly explain why that's so difficult. Unjust enrichment essentially means trying to legally prove that your specific financial and physical input unjustly increased the value of someone else's estate, and you are owed that value back. Try proving the exact monetary value of 3 years of your own hand-cut timber framing in a foreign court system. He is trying to recoup his life savings from a home he physically rebuilt but legally does not own.
It is a devastating nightmare scenario. Think of the arc of his life. He went from being a pilot in absolute command of a 300-ton 747 to humbly building a permanent sanctuary for his family, to suddenly facing the very real prospect of being financially wiped out, rendered homeless in a foreign country, and potentially separated from his young daughter.
So as you read through this, you have to ask, how does an Earth avatar handle that? How on earth do you practice the permaculture ethics of Earth care and people care when you feel utterly, comprehensively betrayed by the person closest to you?
This raises an important question about the fundamental nature of the philosophy itself. The Earth Way, as Kevin practices and teaches it, is absolutely not about toxic positivity. It's not about slapping a smile on your face and pretending everything is fine while your life burns down. Remember Sense 25 from the eco-psychology list, the biological sense of distress and pain. Eco-psychology acknowledges that pain is a natural, necessary, communicative sense. You're supposed to feel it.
Kevin handles this overwhelming trauma through a daily practice he calls discernment. He uses his journal, his writing, to ruthlessly cut through the emotional fog and the panic. He has this rule for himself: when intuition proves right, write it down in red pen. When it's wrong, write it in black. He writes the raw, painful truths down over and over until the narrative of the story is perfectly clear and he can look at it objectively.
And despite the brutal legal warfare, despite the profound heartbreak of the situation, the legal transcripts and his personal correspondence show that he maintains a stance of remarkable, almost superhuman restraint. In letters drafted to his Romanian lawyers, he explicitly states that he seeks no ill will against his ex-partner. His goal is not vengeance. He is not trying to destroy her. His singular goal is justice, sustainability, and securing a safe, thriving financial and emotional future for his daughter, Frida.
He writes this incredible line in his personal notes that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He says that when he feels the acute physical pain of these betrayals, he lets it wash off him like water off a duck's back. It affects him. He absolutely feels the grief and the anger of it, but he actively refuses to let it become his core identity. He refuses to let the trauma pull him completely out of his Green Wave 54 cents connection.
He just keeps planting the garlic.
Exactly. He keeps planting the garlic. He keeps chopping the wood. He forces himself to stay grounded in the physical reality of the earth, beneath his boots, rather than getting completely lost and paralyzed in the abstract, terrifying anxiety of the courtroom battles.
Which requires an immense, almost unfathomable amount of mental discipline. But Kevin doesn't just rely on ancient indigenous practices or permaculture gardening to maintain this discipline, and this is the pivot in the source material that completely caught me off guard. He embraces the very cutting edge of modern technology to help him process it all.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I will admit, I had a hard time wrapping my head around this at first. You would naturally assume that a guy who fled the high-tech aviation industry, who lives entirely off the grid in a 1907 Saxon house, who makes his own soap and advocates for staring softly at trees, would be a massive Luddite. You'd think you'd absolutely hate computers. But Kevin Jarvis is actually a massive power user of artificial intelligence, specifically an AI model named Grok.
It seems like a massive hypocritical contradiction at first glance. The off-grid permaculturist teaming up with an AI. It sounds like the setup to a joke. But when you look closer at how and why he uses it, it is a brilliantly executed synthesis. It started when Kevin's friend Ben reached out to him with a fascinating prompt. Ben asked him how one might apply the grounded principles of permaculture to the modern, frantic logistics and supply chain industry, the very industry Kevin had fled decades ago.
And Kevin responds by sitting down and writing what he calls the Slogistics Manifesto. He takes his past, the Mach 0.82, 10,000 pounds of fuel an hour, globe-trotting life, and he finally applies the earthway to it. He advocates for a tortoise-over-hare approach to global shipping, instead of the incredibly fragile, burnout-inducing just-in-time model that shatters whenever there's a minor disruption. He proposes intentionally buffering our global supply chains.
He suggests radical ideas like prioritizing regional sourcing over global shipping, building deep seasonal buffers of inventory, and utilizing what he calls biomimetic routing. That means intentionally moving massive cargo ships and freighters the way nature naturally moves water or wind, working with the natural oceanic currents and seasonal rhythms, rather than constantly burning thousands of tons of fossil fuels to fight against them just to save 12 hours. He eloquently argues that the true cost of our obsession with speed isn't just the price of jet fuel, it's mass human burnout, profound ecological devastation, and the ultimate hidden fragility of the entire system.
And to write this dense manifesto, to process his ongoing legal trauma, and to meticulously document his unique life for his daughter to read one day, he uses the AI, Grok, as his co-pilot. But listen, he doesn't use it the way most people do. He doesn't just open a chat box and ask it to write a polite email to his lawyer. He uses the technology to create what he calls a living sweater.
The living sweater is a beautiful, deeply poetic metaphor for an incredibly highly technical process. Kevin utilizes an AI model equipped with what is known in the tech world as a massive context window, specifically a 2 million token context window.
Let's explain what that actually means, because it's mind-blowing. 2 million tokens means the AI can simultaneously hold, remember, and cross-reference an astronomical amount of text in its active working memory all at once. It's the equivalent of having 50 full-length novels perfectly memorized and accessible in a single second.
Exactly. And Kevin uploads everything into this massive AI context window. He feeds it the entirety of his PhD dissertation on ecopsychology. He uploads all of his raw, painful, highly technical legal notes from the Romanian courts. He uploads the sprawling transcripts of his memoirs detailing what it felt like to fly the 747 over the Pacific. He even uploads mundane, beautiful daily things like photos of the rainbow sprinkle cakes he bakes and shares with his daughter, and transcribed voice notes from his old friends. He feeds the AI the entire messy, beautiful, deeply painful tapestry of his existence.
And the AI acts as the loom. It weaves all these seemingly completely disparate threads, the profound legal trauma, the deep ecology, the aviation history, the tender fatherly love, into this cohesive, interactive living sweater. He uses the AI to help him spot emotional and philosophical patterns in his own life that he is too close to see. He uses it to refine his writing and to alchemize his raw, unprocessed experiences into digestible wisdom.
There is a specific quote from the chat logs and the sources that just absolutely stops you in your tracks.
Kevin is explaining to the AI itself why he goes through this exhaustive process of documenting his life. He types, "I write because someone out there is stuck in the same jet lag of the soul I once knew. And now I write with a new co-pilot, AI, not to replace the human hand, but to extend it. Not to replace the human hand, but to extend it." That is such a profound reframing of how we view technology. He isn't using AI to escape reality, to numb out or to disconnect, which is exactly what causes Earth misery in the first place. He is actively using the AI as an extension of his own heart to amplify his ability to care for the Earth and to care for people. He is using it to meticulously document the Earthway so that this hard-won knowledge survive intact for the 7 generations to come.
He is literally taking the most advanced, potentially alienating technology of the 21st century, and he is deeply grounding it in the soil of a Transylvanian permaculture farm. It's an absolutely incredible synthesis of the ancient and the futuristic.
So what does this all mean? If we step back and synthesize this entire sprawling journey we've covered today, we see a man who has traversed the absolute extremes of the human experience. Kevin Jarvis went from the pressurized cockpit of a 747, burning thousands of gallons of fossil fuel an hour, quite literally trying to outrun his own soul at Mach 0.82, to sitting quietly in a tiny village in the Carpathians waiting for a fox to fall asleep on his boot.
He traded the deafening roar of turbine engines for the subtle sound of wind in the trees. He traded the exhausting illusion of absolute control for the deeply grounding reality of biological connection. And the most important takeaway is that even when that reality bit back, even when he faced the ultimate tests of betrayal, the terrifying potential loss of his sanctuary, and agonizing, drawn-out legal battles, he didn't abandon the Earthway. He didn't run back to the speed. He used his philosophy as his bedrock. He leaned hard into wide-angle vision to calm his nervous system. He kept returning to his sit spot on that mossy stump, and he used his practice of discernment to keep his heart fiercely open for his daughter.
And the core actionable value here for you, listening to this deep dive right now, is that the cure for your own earth misery is accessible to you right this very second. You do not have to sell everything you own and move to a 1907 house in Romania to begin healing. You don't have to become a literal off-grid permaculture farmer.
Exactly. The Earthway, at its core, is a state of mind and a daily practice. You can start tomorrow. You can find your own personal sit spot on a balcony or in a local park. You can actively practice wide-angle vision while you are walking from your car to your office. You can use the breath-to-heart meditation, hitting that triple breath trigger when your inbox is completely overflowing and you feel that specific modern panic setting in. You can choose, in your own life and your own career, to be the tortoise instead of the hare.
It is entirely about consciously deciding to activate those 54 dormant senses and reminding your biology that you are not separate from the natural world. You are deeply, inextricably woven into it. Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today as we wrap up. We've spent this entire time talking about Dr. Mike Cohen's theory of applied ecopsychology, the incredible idea that we have 54 distinct natural senses connecting us to the vibrant world around us. And yet, if we are honest, we spend almost our entire waking lives staring at glowing screens, sitting in rigid, climate-controlled boxes, completely overloading just 2 of those senses, our sight and our sound, while the rest of our biological wiring slowly starves in the dark. So I want you to think about this as you unplug and go through the rest of your day. Which of your other 52 senses is quietly, desperately screaming for your attention right now? And what kind of incredible, expansive life might open up for you if you finally decided to stop moving so fast? And just listen to it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Mitakuyo Yasin. All my relations.